Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Yamani. Today I have an excerpt from the fourth of 7 modules of my free webinar on 10 essential observations on guns in America. The topic is defensive gun use and what I call the standard model of the irrationality of defensive gun ownership. Please enjoy this excerpt. If you'd like to register for the webinar, registration is still open. You get a full recording of every session, including all of those that you've missed so far. Please find the link to register in the show notes. If you have any comments on this excerpt, or if you want to engage in any discussion of the webinar in general, please do so in the comments here. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you next week. And so observation 4, here we're going to focus on this latter part that I've been bracketing, so many guns are owned for self-defense against crime, gun culture 2.0, concealed carry revolution. But then the part we want to focus on today is, and some are indeed used for that purpose, and whether they are actually safer or not, many people seem to feel safer when they have a gun. So these are the 2 additional dimensions of rights observation number 4 that we want to take up. And when we talk about some are indeed used for that purpose, we're really talking about what falls under the rubric of defensive gun use. Now, defensive gun use is extremely important kind of in the empirical battles over whether guns are a net benefit or a net detriment to society. So, you take all of the positive effects of guns, which would include defensive gun uses, you subtract all the negative effects of guns, homicide, suicide, injury, accidental accidents, other negative outcomes with guns, and then whatever the math shows is that net effect. So again, for people who are on the pro-gun side of this equation, they want to have a really big number of DGUs. For those who are on the anti-gun side, they want to have a very small number of DGUs. And in fact, we'll see the range of estimates of DGUs varies from quite small to quite large. So this question of how many defensive gun uses there are has been hotly debated for a long time. And in fact, it's so hotly debated that oftentimes when I teach my guns class here at Wake Forest, my face-to-face class, I don't even deal with the issue of defensive gun use because it's so murky, right? But, back in the 1990s, Kleck and Gertz, they looked at a whole bunch of different studies and they found that, surveys showed anywhere from several 100,000 to several million defensive gun uses annually. Right, and they, based on their survey, estimated 2.5 million annual defensive gun uses, right? And this is a common number that's invoked by people who are on that pro-gun side of that gun benefit equation. Now, on the other side of that, you have David Hemingway, the very prominent public health scholar from Harvard. He estimated, using the National Crime Victimization Survey, somewhere from 55,000 to 80,000 annual defensive gun uses, right? So extremely small number, again, weights that net gun benefit equation very differently if you opt for that particular number. And we will return to the National Crime Victimization Survey later, so definitely put a pin in that. Now, the question of what actually counts as a defensive gun use is something that not only scholars, within the field disagree about, but it's something that the Rand Corporation and their big project on gun policy in America, where they've attempted to systematically review the scholarly literature in a lot of different areas, right? They actually have a piece out for some time now about the challenges of defining and measuring defensive gun use, right? So everybody has to agree. Well, and everybody doesn't have to, but one of the challenges is getting people to agree on what is a defensive gun use. And then even if you agree on what a defensive gun use is, what's the best way to measure that empirically? And then both of these counts, there's a lot of limits in the field. So another one that I like, this is a little bit earlier. I again often return to the Pew Research Center because I feel like they, have sort of tried to do things straight up the middle, very unbiased way. When I talked to them when they were putting this survey together, I really encourage them not to, I really encourage them to define defensive gun use um, in a way that didn't require the defender to actually fire the weapon. And they did ask, not including combat or as part of your job, have you ever used a gun to defend yourself, your family, or your possessions? And again, including possessions in here, as English did, either by firing it or threatening to fire it. So here, I kind of get an impression, unlike English, that here we're looking at a situation where the person is perhaps at least brandishing the weapon and threatening to fire it, as opposed to English, who says you don't even have to display the firearm. So the Pew Research Center, again, random sample of the US population, they find that 7% of all adults in the United States have said they've used a gun to defend themselves, their family, or their possessions. So 17 million people out there who agree with this. Not surprisingly, among gun owners, it's 17%, or 1 in 6 gun owners have used a firearm, have had a defensive gun use. And interestingly, if you look even at people who don't currently own guns, but own guns in the past, 9% of those people have had a defensive gun use. And even among people who are not current owners and have never owned a gun, 1% of those people have used a gun to defend themselves. So this is, again, something that is not an uncommon part of the American experience. Now, again, the definitional question is always kind of hanging out there. And this is an excerpt from chapter 6 of my book, Gun Curious. And I note here that Pew's question relies on respondents' subjective understanding of a defensive gun use. So one of the challenges of measurement, right, again, even if we can agree on what the definition of a defensive gun use is, we may not agree on measurement issues, but there is also a lot of sort of subjectivity even in understanding whether situations constitute a DGU or not. So I give this situation of Andrew, an acquaintance of mine, drives a delivery truck. He was sitting at a gas station one day waiting to go on his next run when he saw this sketchy looking guy approaching his truck, yelling and acting crazy. So when the man got on the truck's driver's side step and looked into the cab, Andrew held up his Ruger LC9 pistol, and the man got down and left. Andrew considered this a successful defensive gun use. So again, is that a successful defensive gun use? It's, subjective. Some scholars will think yes, some scholars will think no because the firearm wasn't discharged. But also, was that even a situation that required a firearm for self-defense? And as I note here, it's impossible to say. As the Rand Corporation Summary of Research highlights, a major challenge in studying the utility of defensive gun uses is counterfactuals such as these. What would the outcome have been had he not displayed that firearm, right? But not wanting to find out what would happen is a big reason why people use guns preemptively in the first place, right? This is why gun owners make what I call Pascal's wager, right? It's better to display the gun when he may not have needed to than to wait and see if he needed to when it might have been too late.